Welcome to my review of Special Measures, the last of Channel 5's first run of Play for Today 2.0. So if Vertigo Films' offerings felt comfortable and familiar, LA Productions, who made this one, provided the series' substantive spine. Their grittier dramas target those who prefer the edgier terrain of Jack Thorne or Jimmy McGovern. And Special Measures, set in a comprehensive school during an Ofsted inspection, was written and played with a taut tension that felt immediate and real. I was deeply immersed in the complex, fraying emotions of Lee Thompson's social thriller. You could palpably sense the teachers worn to the bone and the overwhelmed trainee, Lewis Grantham, played by Paddy Rowan, utterly failing to command his class's respect. The play brilliantly captured the Olympian absurdity of Ofsted itself, a quasi-autonomous, non-governmental body dispensing grand, life-altering judgments based on a mere snapshot in time. It sparked a critical, radical yearning for change, in me at least. The depiction of early teaching stints felt painfully truthful, laying bare the fear and fragile self-esteem amid chaotic bear pit environments. Even its potentially contrived finale, where the apparently delinquent Callum Hughes, very well played by Austin Haynes, who is accidentally violent towards teacher Amy Garrison, played by Jessica Plummer, where Callum is revealed to be acting out after his mother's sudden death. I think this ultimately actually added rather than detracted from the drama. It highlighted Amy's profound, almost unreasonable capacity for care without shying away from the immense emotional labour unfairly loaded upon her. So yes, personally I felt a far stronger affinity for this play in particular compared with Never Too Late, for example. Special Measures really resonated personally with my own experiences as a lecturer in further education from 2006 to 2018. I watched my sector steadily morph into the same kind of pressure cooker environment that this comprehensive is. Special Measures deployed its realism like a switchblade, enabling viewers to perceive vast structural problems through intimate human drama. The editing was unobtrusive, the use of music judiciously reticent. The spare, understated choices felt human-centric and refreshingly non-manipulative, following the esteemed, fact-inspired trend of recent state-of-the-nation dramas like Help, which was Jack Thorne, 2021 on Channel 4, and Thorne and Stephen Graham's Adolescence on Netflix, 2025. And indeed the fact-based work of Joseph Bullman and Aisha Raphael for the BBC and Channel 4, massively underrated figures in British television, those two. Thompson's script was wise and insightful, infused with a gallows humour essential in a system where education is cruelly undermined by a societal failure to value either pupils or teachers. Schools too often resemble carceral holding pens with a hidden curriculum of instilling social conformity and obedience to 9-to-5 labour. I think the setting was great here. We've got a convincing Liverpool school, maybe an academy rather than a comprehensive, I can't quite remember. Austin Haynes' teenage pupil was a convincingly blank, sullen presence, while Jessica Plummer, among a gallery of verisimilar performances, was compellingly typical of the soldiering on and the soldering on required in a broken system. You felt every ounce of the pressure placed upon her so early in her career. While I think this first series of the new Play for Today provided strong roles for the old especially, and to an extent the young, people in their 30s to 50s were far less present generally. In Special Measures, I think this absence pointedly highlighted the teaching profession's exodus of mid-career staff. You didn't actually have really that many who were in their 30s to 60s really in this play. There's a lot of people in their 20s, very early career. I think when it comes to the socio-political import, Special Measures was by far the strongest, really, of the four new Channel 5 plays for today. It was a powerful indictment of an education system buckling under long-term Tory austerity and meddling curriculum reforms, exposing the resulting insipid lessons and how the staff are completely run ragged, to demand fairer teacher workloads, smaller classes, and an end to excessive marking. Like, those aims are all implicit underneath this drama. When speaking to other researchers and academics about Special Measures, there were some criticisms of its brevity, 45 minutes perhaps not being enough for the amount Lee Thompson was trying to cram in. I think those are actually valid criticisms, and Christine Geraghty, for example, commented that there should have been more exploration of why certain decisions were being made in the school and why Ofsted exists even, and the whole context of Ofsted could have been explored in much more depth, which I think is a fair point. I mean, hopefully this will improve in the second series with them running to more 60-minute plays. To relate it to the classic series and other single plays of the era of Play for Today, I mean, I didn't think it was quite as great a work, say, as Roll On 4 O'Clock, Colin Welland's 1970 Granada play, which is superb. The Birth of a Nation for Central, David Leland's play about a comprehensive, whereas Roll On 4 O'Clock was about secondary modern. And of course, Ken Loach and Barry Hines' Kes are all masterful works. And really, Speech Day as well, also Barry Hines, was a 1973 play for today, which does more of an exposure of how the school fits in with the whole of society. To an extent, that is there with Special Measures in how Amy is basically also having to be a social worker, effectively, in the amount of care that she's doing. Speech Day has this whole absurd pantomime of the speech day, Blake's Jerusalem being sung when these kids are being prepared for jobs that aren't going to be around for much longer. Basically, a very limited education is being provided. It's very similar to Kes, really. Works like Traitor and Oh Fat White Woman from 1971, which show the more sort of elitist schooling, like a prep school in Oh Fat White Woman, where there's lots of bullying going on, abuse from the teacher towards the pupils. He beats lots of lads there in the prep school. And you got Gotcha in 1977 with Phil Davis and Gareth Thomas raging at each other, the pupil and teacher in that one. And then you had an interesting move in the 1980s. You didn't have quite so many 1980s plays of today which were set in schools, really, but you had, right at the start of the 80s, Chance of a Lifetime in a Teesside school, and right at the end, the very last play for the day, The Amazing Miss Stella Estelle from Leslie Stewart, are both relatively benign pictures of comprehensive schools at that time among a very increasingly dangerous wider society. They're a bit of a haven. And I think you can see that Amy is trying to provide that in Special Measures, but the odds are massively stacked against her in the era of the 2020s, of course. So how did it do with critics and public? Well, it got the lowest audience of the four, 346,000, 9,000 lower than The Trial, which in some ways was a tryout for this new play for today, but not using the name. But it got slightly higher viewer share, 3.3% compared with The Trial's 2.8% back in May last year when The Trial was on. I mean, it was promoted to a reasonable extent, but probably a little bit less promoted than the others, although I myself tried to give it a boost by mentioning it on BBC Radio 4's Front Row in very early November as the one that I felt was most in the Play for Today tradition. It wasn't reviewed by any critics at all, again, which I think is, again, pretty pitiful. I mean, it did receive praise from Radio Times previewer David Brown, saying that they saved the best till last, and a listener praised it on Scott Bryan's Radio 5 live show. And I think my comrade Katie Crossan, who wrote an interview article with the writer Lee Thompson, and Emma Turner, director from Big Winners, and Paul Testar, key commissioning editor at Channel 5. Katie has observed that various teachers have attested to its truth as well on social media. So I think it seems to have got a reasonable reaction, but it might have got a lot more reaction if it had been shown first, perhaps. In terms of the IMDb and Letterboxd, about 78% was its score from those, and it's by far the highest scoring on the IMDb, and slightly less than A Knock at the Door on Letterboxd. And I would rate it 87%. I'd say this is very, very good work that just is massively truthful. Some people might say that this isn't anything particularly new in terms of school drama, but it is about the teachers and about the system and the setup of a school much more than a lot of the long-running school dramas, which are good in their way. So some overall reflections on Series 1. For me, the LA Productions' commitment to personal dramas with socio-political reverberations appealed the most. The first new series, A Play for Today, feels a cautious yet highly promising first step. The appetite for single-authored television drama remains, and the plays that truly resonated for me were those that understood one of the original Strand's greatest strengths, using the intimate to illuminate the societal. At times, particularly with the LA Productions pair, it felt like something of the original Play for Today's malleability with genre was being revived, though I would hope for greater tonal and narrative unpredictability in Series 2. There was very little experimentation, with an understandable naturalism used to tell clear, generally involving stories. This sparse realism is directly in the lineage of most original plays of the day, roughly 8 in every 9, really. But we hope future series will also try to startle in the way of landmarks like Penda's Fen, David Rudkin's 1974 masterpiece, or Dennis Potter's Blue Remembered Hills, 1979. When speaking to the Channel 5 bosses, they didn't seem to think it was likely that they would do something as radical as The Cheviot the Stag and A Black Black Oil, which is formally and politically radical. John McGrath's 1974 Play for the Day. It's a favourite of Lee Thompson's, who uses it in his teaching, as he told us in the Tribune interview piece, which I urge you all to read. There's a link provided in the comments section to the Tribune piece. It is tremendous to have Play for Today back, and with another 6 plays confirmed to come in 2026, the potential for variation and bold public storytelling is within reach. Thanks everyone for listening to these 4 reviews of Play for Today 2.0. Merry Christmas.